Welcome to the Learning Reinvented Podcast, brought to you by myself, Katie Godden, and the team from The Learning Effect. There are lots of learning podcasts out there, so we wanted to do something slightly different. This week, we're discussing performance training. I'm delighted to welcome Adam Lagood to the podcast. Thank you for joining me. Would you like to introduce yourself to our listeners?
Certainly. Yes, Adam Lagood. I'm from Melbourne in Australia, and I've been in the learning and development industry for over 30 years now, and I've been self-employed for about 28 of them, and have done all things L&D, and I just love the industry. So that's a little bit about me. Outside of L&D, I'm an avid photographer, and I'm also president of the Knox Photographic Society here in Melbourne as well. So, yeah, very busy.
Well, I bet you get lots of good things to take photographs of. So what really drove your passion for learning and development, and what got you into it in the first place?
Yeah, it's interesting. My career journey is quite interesting. I was working in HR and in recruitment, and I attended a training course as a participant and thought, gee, I'd really like to do that. So there was a vacancy coming up. I was in the state government. There was a vacancy coming up in the what was then called training and development branch. So I applied for it very enthusiastically, and was told categorically that I did not have the skills and experience necessary to work in training and development. I should just stick to HR. So I was a bit downtrodden there, and sort of packed that away and thought, well, you know what? I like my career in recruitment. That's fine. And I chuffed along for another few years in that area. And one of the participants who was in that same course that I was in, she was the HR manager for another department. She rang me up and said, would you like to take a secondment, a temporary position in our learning and development team? And I responded immediately, but I don't have the skills and experience to be in learning and development, which made her laugh. And she said, don't be silly, come across. So I went across, and at first, all I did was hire other people to have all the fun. But with a bit of a theatre background, I soon really, really wanted to do the presentation myself. And one of the facilitators that I hired asked me if I'd like to do a segment on his negotiation skills workshop, much to the upset of my manager. So I did do that, and I absolutely loved it. It was dreadful, by the way. It was an absolute abomination of a session, but I absolutely loved it, and thought, this is where I want to go. So I then did a train the trainer course, and went back to my training team, but my boss still wouldn't let me train because we were brokers. So I always rely on the kindness of strangers. Another one of the facilitators that I hired, unbeknownst to me, got my resume and sent it off to a local college who were doing adult learning in the evenings. And suddenly I get a phone call from them saying, would you like to run these 3 different courses? And I went, sure. It's after hours. It was in the evenings. I think it was 6 to 8 or something like that. So that's how I got my start. And from there, I brought that back in to the organization I was working in, and then for the next probably 6 or 7 years, presented as an internal consultant, and then went out on my own after having done a fair bit of research that I wasn't going to starve to death. I went out on my own and have been doing that ever since. So I just love it. I love the theatre of it, but I also love watching people's cogs turn on. I love watching people get what you're saying and learning, and sometimes for us in learning development, because we run the same courses over and over again, we forget what it's like not to know our topic, and it's great to watch that. To me, it keeps me fresh watching people have those aha moments with things that I take for granted sometimes. Yeah. So that's a little bit about why I love it.
That sounds very interesting. I think there's a common theme between the people that I interview and the love for kind of watching people develop, etc. So that's really great. So can you explain a little bit more about your business then?
Okay, so it's interesting. It's 1995, so it'll be 29 years in June. But I went out on my own. I had been in the public service long enough to have what we call long service leave here in Australia, which is basically once you've done 10 years service, you get 3 months holiday paid. So I quit my job and took my 3 months, where I was being paid for 3 months, to set up my business. Contacted a few. I sent out 100 flyers, and I got 3 or 4 bites. And how I operate the business is that I work for myself and I work on my own, but I have a huge range of other consultants that I call on. So if a client were to ask me, do you do any Microsoft Excel training? I would say, well, I don't, but my mate Steve does, and I'd call on Steve and he'd do that for me. Or if it was some wellness, well-being training, I might call on Tash. But I have a huge stable of people that I trust with my brand, I suppose. And it's all about, I suppose what it's all about is it's fundamental training is about bringing the joy back into the training room. I remember hearing an author, or reading an author once, a guy called Bob Pike, and he wrote a book called Creative Training Techniques. And he said, the mind can only absorb what the bottom can endure. In other words, if you're not comfortable in the training room, nothing's getting in. So I suppose my first priority is the psychological safety and comfort of the people in the training room, and building rapport with them. So I have a background in psychology, and I've always loved human behavior. So observing it and tapping into it is one of the things I love. So fundamental training, been around for a while. I have personally a wide range of topics that I train on. We follow that up sometimes with coaching, and do a number of other, learning related exercises as well. Yeah. What else would you like to know?
And what sort of challenges are your businesses and clients that you work with facing at the moment in regards to performance training?
Okay, well, we'll start with the clients first. I think the clients, there's this whole post-COVID thing. You've got the working from home, and you've got people who can't wait to get back into the office, and you've got people who can't think of anything worse than going back into the office. You've got leaders who don't trust people who don't come into the office. So there's a whole lot of those things. But there's also this a bit of a post-COVID hangover where people are just a little bit more, what would be the right word? Laissez-faire is not right. They're a little bit more complacent about their work, and not as dedicated to their work life as they used to be. I think that's how I'm reading it. So getting people motivated is quite difficult. If you want to do performance training, of course, then it's either online, which is okay, or you try to drag people into the office and just supply them with a bit of morning tea and lunch and try to motivate them that way. But I think there seems to be what do they call it? The great job shift, or a great job change, or something, where they thought everybody was leaving. I can't remember what the exact title was, but I don't really think that happened. I just think people realize that work is not the number one priority in their life anymore. There are other things, so they're not as motivated perhaps. But look, I'm finding, because I predominantly do face-to-face training, I do online training as well, but I'm finding more and more that my clients are using the face-to-face training as a way to get people back into the office and back into that sort of teamy collaboration thing that we used to have. So that's picking up quite a lot. Other challenges. Other challenges is there's a lot of stuff out there masquerading as training, which is a lot of it is box ticking. Go off and do this $29 course from, Trainings Are Us, and then you'll be a leader in 45 minutes. So there's a lot of stuff out there that really doesn't pass the sniff test. And it's cheap, it's easy, but I don't think learning's actually taking place. So I think that's another challenge for people, the perception of learning. Yeah. Any other challenges? Oh, I can't think of any other challenges at the moment, but let's come back to that again later.
Yeah, definitely. So with that in mind, so obviously like kind of lack of motivation, or a change in motivation since COVID, and the uprise of kind of these cheap courses that you can find everywhere. Have you had to change your approach and how you approach clients, how you approach your sales tactics, etc.?
Yeah, well, you're right there, because why do I need to do a 4-day leadership course or a 5-day leadership course when I can get it online? And literally, and this is a statement of fact, 29 Australian dollars will get you a leadership course, apparently. So I don't do any sort of pre-recorded training. And one of the reasons is, how do you make that economically viable if there's a course out there for $29? And $29, by the way, is about £15, £14. So it's people are trading on volumes. So for me, what I've got to do is have a point of difference, and that is it's more of an experience. It's customized, because this is one of the other issues, I think, is buying. It's always been there, by the way. Buying a training package off the shelf is wonderful, but what works in manufacturing doesn't necessarily work in dentistry. And so, one of the things, I hate the word bespoke, but it's bespoke. I'm doing a course tomorrow for a local library, and it's written for local libraries. In a couple of weeks' time, I'm doing one for a lighting company, bunch of engineers, and so it's written for them. The topic might be the same, but it's customized in their language with their case studies, and tailored just for them. I mean, I've seen some stuff off the shelf that it blatantly, I've said, well, there's some flawed concepts in there. They're just not right. And one of them was a very prestigious organization. They were doing online training, and they had an incorrect version of SMART goals in their kit. And I just thought they should do better for that price. So yeah, just be a point of difference, and make learning an experience. It needs to be something that's enjoyable, not something that's endured.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think with the rise of technology, it's enabled these companies to be able to create content and get it out quickly. And I think in some ways it's fine to be able to do that. But then, like you're experiencing, you're also sharing potentially incorrect data, which isn't good as well. So with technology constantly evolving, what is the impact on your business? Is it an impact? Is it just that you're able to buy content that's cheap and off the shelf, or are there other aspects that impact that as well?
Look, technology is fantastic. It's, as you said, it's always evolving. But what we've got to remember is the new technology is an additional tool in the toolkit, not a replacement for the other tools. I use online all the time. There are times when that is the only viable option for a client. We do online learning, and it's fantastic because you can see everybody. You can share your screen. You can breakout rooms and all those sorts of things. I think the problem I have is I get used to one. Like my preference is for Zoom, so I get used to Zoom, and then the client says, "But we only do Teams," and then I've got to learn Teams. So I don't mind learning new technology, but the other day I thought I was in Teams and I thought I have no idea where the whiteboard is here. So I instead of using a whiteboard, I shared my screen, opened up a page in Word, and just typed it into Word. So I'm very flexible that way, I suppose. But and technology is aided me in lots of ways. In my business, I used to have to go and visit a client for a meeting. It could be a 2-hour drive there and a 2-hour drive back for a 20-minute meeting. This is a fantastic tool for actually, getting in there and having a look and getting to meet the people. I love it. Just what's not to love? There's all the apps and the Mentimeters and the Kahoots and all those sorts of things that we use in the training. In fact, in a few weeks' time, we do have a face-to-face residential session, and one of the features of it will be the beginning of every day there will be a Kahoot quiz about the day before, and Steve also uses, I can't remember which technology he uses, but he creates word clouds for topics and so on. So all of those apps are just brilliant. Keeping up with them is the hard part. Finding the time. And the network that I belong to, the Institute for Learning and Performance, we have a session on a Friday, a networking session on a Friday, and it's great because we're always learning a new tool or a new app or something like that in there. So it's great. And then we go to AI. Let me talk about AI. I love AI. My best example of this, or I probably shouldn't put this on a podcast, but never mind. One of my clients contacted me and said, "Do you have any sessions on unconscious bias?" And I thought, I talk about unconscious bias in lots of my courses, but I don't have a session on it. So I opened up the artificial intelligence and I typed in, if you were in learning and development and wanted to write an outline for a program on unconscious bias, what would it look like? And it spat out this beautiful outline, which I put it into my language because it's always very sort of Android-y sounding. So I rewrote it all, took out the bits that I didn't understand, left the bits in that I did understand, sent it off to the client, and she came back and said, "Well, you know what? That sounds so much better than the other options we were given. Can you do the course?" So now I've got some research to do, but I love researching new topics, and which is probably why I've got such a large suite of programs that I run. It's going to be the highlight of my month is going to be writing a half-day session on unconscious bias, and the aim of the session, of course, is to make them conscious. But yeah, look, I love getting into it. I'm sometimes a slow adapter to technology, but as soon as I see one of my colleagues going, "Oh, you should use this," or have a go at that, I'll embrace it. Use it for the benefit that it is. Yeah.
Yeah, I think AI is going to be a powerful tool. And like you said, you gave a great example on how you can use that in regards to learning and development. I think it's definitely you're able to use that as a start point, and like you did, tweak that and personalize it to your business, organization, whatever you're doing. But yeah, I think that's going to be a powerful tool going forward, especially in learning and development. And I hope people do embrace it because it's there to help you and support you rather than kind of replace you as well.
Absolutely, as long as you use it wisely. So I tapped into it the other day and I said, "Give me 10 dot points on," I can't remember what the topic was, but give me 10 dot points on performance management. It wasn't that, but that doesn't matter. And it spat out 10 dot points, and I only liked 4 of them. But having read those 4, that sparked my imagination, and I came up with the other 6 or the other however many I ended up with. But so it's a catalyst. It's a good catalyst.
Yeah, no, definitely. We've used it in the same sort of way as well, and creating images and stuff like that. Like, I'm no graphic designer, but we were able to create images super quickly. And yeah, like it is amazing what you are able to do with that, and the technology that is available to us now.
Yeah. Well, you see, that's where it impinges on my life, because as a photographer, AI is quite problematic for us as photographers. But luckily, I've got such a large catalogue of photos, I probably don't need the AI for the generating of images.
No, and they'll never be able to replace you actually going out and taking photos. So
Absolutely.
that's a good thing. They can make them up, but they're not real. So going forward, what does the future look like for you and your business?
Okay. Well, I see it getting stronger. There was a period, a few years before COVID, which I call the heyday of L&D, as an external consultant. And L&D goes in ebbs and flows. What happens, and this is my observation over the decades that I've been in it. We have internal L&D people who do the training, and then people realize, you know what, that's not economically viable. Let's have them as brokers, and they'll hire the external people. And then somebody says, well, that's not economically viable. Why don't we have these people in-house? And it sort of, the pendulum swings from hiring external consultants like me to doing it all in-house. And I'm seeing now that the pendulum swung back to, there's I call it the myth of the consultant. You can have an internal person come in and say, let's talk about performance management training, but they're just that person from down the corridor. But you've got the consultant coming in and talking about performance management and so on. And there's this credibility, extra credibility, because they've got somebody from outside, and this person is a perceived expert. And the reason it came to it was very interesting. I was actually setting up for training one day in one of the banks here in Australia, and there was two people talking in the corridor, and the beginning of the conversation was, well, what did you think of that facilitator? Somebody else, and the other person said, well, they had their own business card, so they must know what they're talking about. And I thought, is that all it takes? Just print a
If you're
business
basing
card.
it on that. Yeah.
And you're an expert if you've got a business card. You get them printed at the airport. But there is that sort of, it gives it extra weight if you've got somebody, coming in from outside the organization. As long as that person embraces the organization. I remember attending some project management training, and the facilitator kept talking about construction projects and road projects and building this and building that. We worked in the Department of Human Services, so we were all social workers and admin people and so on, and we couldn't relate to it all. He couldn't relate to our world, but we certainly couldn't relate to his. And so again, no learning took place. All the case studies, all the activities revolved around building and construction. And some of them I think were even IT. But when I took over the running of that course, I'm shooting myself in the foot here. I took over the running of that course as an internal consultant. And what I did is I changed all the case studies and all the anecdotes and all the examples to work and projects that we were working on in the department. And now when I go into a client, I will actually draw the projects from the people in the room. So I train at a university here in project management, and one day we'll be talking about a stakeholder analysis on nanotechnology, and the next day we're talking about a risk assessment on how to eliminate dengue fever from Singapore. And they're all in the same room at the same time, so use their projects.
Yeah, definitely. That's something that we do at the Learning Effect. Like when we're speaking to our customer initially, in them kind of discovery sessions, and then we maintain that throughout. We really understand the purpose, not what only they're doing as a department, but what the whole company's doing as well. So we roll everything back to the purpose, and we align everything back to the purpose. And we find that we get a lot higher engagement. If you miss that bit out, or if people don't want to share that information, it's really difficult to embed the the things that you're saying, whether you're helping them, whether you're training them, you know, so it is really powerful to get that level of understanding in there.
Yeah. You end up as a facilitator trying to learn those things from the people in your room, and you shouldn't be doing that. You should have been informed about those things afterwards. But one thing I have found is sometimes the client doesn't tell you everything you need to know.
Yeah.
I had an experience a number of years ago where I went in to do a customer service course again for a local library, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't engage with a group. And it was about probably getting close to lunchtime. And somebody said to me, "You know why we're running this course, don't you?" And I said, "Yeah, because customer service training is important." He said, "No, we had a mystery shopper experience a few weeks ago, and the report came back and we failed. So we're being punished by having to come to your course." And no one had told me that. I think I would have changed the way I delivered my course if I'd known that.
That's a negative outlook from the beginning, definitely.
Yeah, so luckily I had a string of, I think, 4 or 6 courses. So the group 2 got a much different facilitation than group 1 did.
Well, thank you very much, Adam, for joining me today. It's been really great to speak to you. If people want to get in touch with you and learn more about yourself and your business, how do they go about doing so?
Okay, well, firstly, one of the benefits of my surname, Le Good, is it's not that difficult to look up on the internet, but my company's name is Fundamental Training and Development. We have a webpage, ftd.com.au, but I'm also on LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram as well. So just look me up. I'm not far away.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And we'll put those in the show notes below. Thank you once again.
Oh, fantastic. My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Learning Reinvented podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. If you've not already done so, please follow our podcast. And if the Learning Effect can help you and your organisation, please do get in touch. You can find both James and Katie on LinkedIn, and our contact details are in the show notes below.